You're listening to the Mind Your Business podcast, episode number 84. Today, we're talking all about business burnout. So, stay tuned. Hi, I'm James Wedmore, and I've built a 7-figure internet business that offers the financial freedom to do what I want, when I want. And I'm the first to say that hard work and hustle are not essential ingredients for your success. So, how do you build a thriving business from the inside out? This is the Mind Your Business podcast, featuring myself and co-host Phoebe Mroczek. All right, you made it. You're here. Welcome to the show. I'm James Wedmore.
And I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And this is the Mind Your Business podcast, where we're talking everything entrepreneurial mindset, creating success from the inside out, the emotional up and down roller coaster that is our journey in building our business. It's a fun journey, isn't it?
It is a fun journey. Lots of ups, but I feel like people don't always talk about the down parts.
The down. That's what today's episode is dedicated all about, or all to. The downs of that up and down roller coaster, burnout.
Everyone's got it. No one's talking about it. And it's funny, in my private conversations that I've had with a couple entrepreneurs lately, this has been at the forefront of most of my conversations. And it's so funny because people feel almost this like shame or this guilt around it. And it really just doesn't need to be like that. But I feel like no one's talking about it.
Yeah.
And so when James and I were just on a walk trying to figure out, just trying to get inspired. And we're like, yeah, we talked about all these great things on the podcast, but what are people not talking about?
Yeah, like we do want to, I think it's really important because we are like super like positivity and law of attraction and close your eyes and think of the brand new red Ferrari and there it is in the driveway. But you can't have the yin without the yang, and this is the yang. Dang.
That was terrible.
Dang. So we're going to talk about burnout. Phoebe mentioned that most of us have experienced it. You might be listening here suffering from it right now. So I want to start with a story because I've been doing this for a long time, and this has been part of the beauty of this batching session. Phoebe being out here in the studio is reflecting on 9 years of the ups and downs that I've gone through, and just like looking at the totality of my journey of where I've come so far and where I want to continue to go. And I definitely suffered a really big burnout, which we'll get into. Basically, it was shortly after my first big win. So if we look at my timeline, I first decided this is what I want to do with my life and my business. I found a purpose. I found meaning. This is it back in 2007. And I created this first book on the internet called Bartend for Profit. It was like trickling in a few sales and oh my gosh, it's kind of working, but I've worked really hard. And so I got a taste of it, enough to keep going. But it wasn't that big cash windfall that I think so many of us have craved, right? We're like, where's that big launch that moves mountains and shakes up the industry and all eyeballs are on you and it's effortless and it's in what you do, but the results are just extraordinary, right?
Because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, because everyone else is doing it. Well, I had that. Okay, so I had that. So 2007 comes and goes, 2008, 2009, 2010, in September of 2011, right? So now like 3-4 years later, all that time, 4 years of just desire and frustration and push and why isn't it working, and I'm building something and I'm getting there, and it all came together in this one beautiful, glorious moment where in 30 days, I sold over $400,000 worth of a $97 online course, a product called Video Traffic Academy. And it catapulted my name. It put me on the map. Just the floodgates of opportunities opened up. And for the first time, there was money in my bank account that I could really be like, hey, it's not leaving faster than it's coming in. And I fell into the darkest and deepest depression. I don't know if it was depression, but I don't know any other time in my life, but I was bored every single day. I was really just, the 4 years of that struggle, I was at least motivated to reach that launch or to reach that big windfall. And now it had happened. And yes, the first things that kind of go through my mind were, well, I did it. Is that what it was supposed to be about? Is this what it was all cracked up to be? And then, of course, well, now what? And I would say, again, I don't know if it was depression or not, but I just didn't want to get off the couch. I had no motivation. I didn't work. I kind of questioned a lot of things. Started, smoking pot like every day. That didn't help, by the way. Like that just keeps, and you're just kind of in this like, well, it, like, and I'm just kind of like questioning everything.
Yep.
And then you, of course, start noticing it, right? Being the entrepreneur and loving personal development. You're like, man, I'm really just not motivated. Well, it.
Yeah, tomorrow. And you're like, now it's been 3 weeks.
Yeah. and so it was a good 2 months of this. It was November and December of 2011. So we had just like September and October. I can't tell you, like, especially back then, like there was just a black and white difference to have 1,000 people on a webinar and having a little indicator saying, the webinar is full. People are trying to get in and they can't. And having 1,000 people on for an hour straight and then pitching a product for the first time really on a webinar and just seeing like just sales coming in. And, you're with your buddies and your business partner and we're just like high-fiving and like, this is the most amazing thing. And then it's done. And you're like, now what? So I remember the moment that began to turn around. And so I really want to tell a little bit more of this story because I think, again, you're not alone if you've ever felt this or if you're feeling it right now, because this was me feeling it. But this was also the worst it's ever been. So I was completely just lackluster. Like it did feel like everything turned to gray. There was no reason to do anything at this point.
Did that happen to your business partner too?
No, just me. Yeah, just me. As far as I know, who knows? My ex-girlfriend for Christmas gave me a tape or a CD, and it came in the mail with a note. And, I'd been intrigued now with things like the law of attraction and stuff like this. And she basically wrote a little note saying that you should have a listen to this tape because it's basically like what the movie The Secret was supposed to be, but didn't really tell. And this is it. And it was I think like 8-part tape series, but it was all in one burned CD that I got by a gentleman by the name of Kevin Trudeau called the Success Tapes or Success Series or something.
So good.
And the thing is like, fast forward, like I didn't know this guy. And like, if you Google him, there's like a lot of shady stuff about him. And like, I think he had to like flee the country. And I didn't know that, but I pressed play on this first tape, and I remember where I was standing when I pressed play. I like synced it all into my iPod at the time or something, and I decided I'm going to go for a walk. And I went to a local high school track, and I just started walking and listening to it. And the first 30 minutes is just bragging about this guy, like all of his accomplishments. And it was just inspiring to hear, wow, that's a lot of stuff I want to do. And wow, that's really impressive. And then it was like followed up because he's used these principles of, manifesting, law of attraction. And so for me, it was the first time, like I'd heard all this stuff at this point, but it was the first time I saw someone like using it in business and life and like having tangible physical results, not just like, well, I feel inner peace now, and it was like, that's amazing. And so I just kept listening and I kept listening. And I just learned so much from those tapes. It was hours of them, so it's just like in your ear all day, which is one of the reasons like why we do this podcast, because I distinctly remember walking downtown and going on the beach and I just couldn't wait to put him back in my ear and just have him tell me more. And it was slow, and I'd share it with some of my friends, like, this is the best thing. This is like the most amazing thing I've ever heard. And they're like, it's long and it's slow and he doesn't get to it. And it's like, are you kidding? It's like a movie, your favorite movie that never ends. And so I just loved it. And I just started to notice all these things happening in my life. First of all, like there was the excitement and passion of just wanting to watch it or go out and do something and listen to it. Like I was excited to do laundry at the laundromat. I didn't have a laundry machine at the time because I'd have an extra hour to listen to it. And I'm learning all these things about how your brain is like a radio tuner, and you can just tune the dial to any frequency of the thing that you want, and you'll bring it in. And I learned all these analogies of things like if you just remember to that time when you were a little kid. For me, a little boy waiting on Christmas Eve, all excited and ready for Christmas Day, and I can't wait for tomorrow and all the gifts I'm going to have under that tree. It's like, what if you just lived your life that way? And all of a sudden, I found myself doing that, and it was no longer the question that I was stuck in, and the attitude and the energy I was stuck in this like depressed burnout state, which was like, is this what it's all cracked up to be? Is like, what else is there? If I've accomplished this, there's nothing, left on the horizon. And instead it became a new game. And that's really the first piece of this. I found a new game where it was about choosing my emotions first, to make it my dominant intent to find almost like a game of hide and go seek. Like, where is my happiness today? Because it moves. That's the thing I've learned after 9 years. And so this is beginning the story out of that burnout for me. And I can't stress enough that yes, I will have a bad day. Yes, I will have a day where I'm unmotivated. And that happens to the best of us. But I have never had this type of burnout or this type of a low ever since then, because I found a new game where, yeah, it changes. But you're always going, well, what is going to make me happy today? And where is that happiness? And where is the gratitude? And how can I start there and just let that take me? And the moment I did that, again, you're still listening to these CDs. There was just so many examples of new and exciting miracles happening in my life. At the time I was single, so I would do fun, okay, what are things that I can attract into my life? So I'm imagining women approaching me and having conversations with complete strangers, and sure enough, that would all of a sudden was happening left and right. That was one of my favorite ones was, and we've told this on other episodes, where I would look for coins or foreign coins or just money on the street, and it just started popping up. And then every time you see it, I would grab the money and I would just like crank up the feeling of gratitude and energy and excitement to literally where it's just like, you could just feel your body was like buzzing. And I'm just like, okay, yes, more of this, please. This is amazing. And I literally felt like I was buzzing. And then you realize like, oh my gosh, like I am a manifesting master. And I just had so many examples of this where I all of a sudden started going like, I got to be really effing careful about what I think about and what I feel. Because I remember one night laying in bed and going, just feeling so grateful and so excited and so alive that I couldn't even sleep. And I said, what am I going to manifest tomorrow? What is tomorrow going to bring me? And I'm like, man, it's brought me so much. And we're talking like it's January 10th now, right? Christmas was when I got the tape, and it's been 2 weeks and my life has already changed. And I remember saying, I think I need some more adventure in my life. I want more adventure. Within an hour of waking up the next day, I get a phone call from one of my buddies, Bradley Will. Or no, it was a text first, and then it turned into a phone call where he said, dude, I just got us 2 tickets to go skydiving. And I'm like, careful what you effing wish for, because I have the biggest fear of flying, heights, falling. Definitely falling out of an airplane is something, no thank you. And there I was on an adventure flying out of an airplane. And then that unfolded to, like, what else do I want? And I remember visiting my good buddy, Lewis Howes, in New York in January that year. And all of a sudden I go, I want to live here. And this is amazing. And I spent a week with him. And every moment I stepped outside, I just like tuned into the energy of the city, and I like imagined that I was already living there, and I just imagined what it would be like and how it would feel, and I didn't even have to imagine it because I was there, and I'm like, this is just me living here. And sure enough, less than 2 months later, I packed my bags and I was there for a year. And ever since then, New York still has played such a huge role in my life. That's where I've gone several times a year there. I proposed to my wife there in Central Park, and we're actually going to be living there for 4 to 6 weeks coming up this fall. So I was just like, oh my goodness, I'm out of this thing. And what it came down to is I made that my dominant focus. I made that the game. I noticed so fast after I was out of it and in this new experience how much I was so attached and tied and focused to that one goal that as soon as I accomplished it, like that's what we are as entrepreneurs. We're kind of going around saying, let's see what else I can do. Let's see if I can do this. And we make that like our life. And then when we do it, it's kind of like, well, I did it. Now what? And if there isn't that next game or that next level that you're already preparing for, it can be so easy to jump back into that. So I had attached so much meaning and happiness and the definition of who I was, my identity to this big goal of big vision of making this cash windfall, having this big launch, that when it came and left, I was, what else am I, right? There was no other goal in my life. There was no other driving force. And I think that's the first tip I have for our listeners is that you don't need to have the 5-year, the 10-year, the 20-year plan. But I think the moment we can start to pull back and see a bigger picture of like, what are we shooting towards and what's the direction we're going beyond this next launch or beyond this next project, I think is one piece that we'll get into today that was really big, really important for me. But there are 3 phases that we're going to talk about here that was my personal focus. And this was actually the shift out of that first phase for me. So up until 2011 or now 2012, the shift was James got to get paid, right? That was the big thing was like, okay, I got to do this. I got to make my money, survival mode. You got to get what's yours. And that's what drove me. As soon as you do that, I had nothing left. There was no other motivation. And I think that's where we see a lot of people stop. And this is where I've now been in this industry for 9 years. How many people I've seen come and go, come and go. Some who never make it, some who hit it big, one-hit wonders, and then they're gone. And I think this shift has to happen. The second shift from this phase 1 of, figuring out yours. The motivation is money. The motivation is your lifestyle, which is beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. We're big fans of that. There's nothing wrong with wanting a bunch of money. Go for it. Do it. It's awesome. But when you can shift to something beyond that, you get into phase 2 of this 3-phase process that I've experienced, which is the customer-centric phase, where you are more concerned and more focused on the transformation and the impact of your students and your customers, that becomes the driving motivator. And I think we'll talk about what that phase looks like in a minute, but I wanted to check in with Phoebe because I've been talking so much.
No, I mean, at the beginning, it's funny when you're talking about Kevin Trudeau, because I remember you giving me you told me to listen to his stuff on YouTube, and I know exactly where I was. I was in Berlin, and I was like, I'm going to go on a walk. And my boyfriend at the time was like, all right, I'll see you in 20 minutes. And I put him in, and I was gone for like 3 hours. I was just walking all around the city. And I got to know the city really well because of him, because I would just plug it in. And you warned me. You said, be careful. Like, it's a slow burn. Get over the first, 4
hours.
Yeah, it was rough. But then I got into it, and the reason why I think it resonated so much with me was that it was really practical stuff. And it was like, oh, he breaks it down, and it's, sometimes some of these, spiritual guides, but like people who have all these meditations and stuff, sometimes it kind of goes over my head and I don't really understand the language. And especially at that time, it just was not resonating with me. So he was the first one to be like, this is what happens. Here's what you got to do. And this is why. And this is what happened for me. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. So walking all around Berlin was awesome to me. So the fact that you remember exactly where you were, I totally do. And I started to kind of play little games also and just see what I was manifesting. And just talking to my friends at that time, I'm like, just listen to this Kevin Trudeau guy. And then they would Google him and be like, what are you listening to?
I remember talking to someone about this who was like, man, I listened to those tapes years ago and they were just unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And we're like, yeah, but have you seen this guy? Like, who he is? And we had a great conversation around like, can we separate the message from the messenger?
Yeah.
And in this case, if this is something you guys want to like dive into, like separate the message from the messenger. There is some purity in that message that took me out of the worst funk that I've ever been in and kind of reshaped the way I look at life and really instilled all this woo-woo stuff that I had been hearing and said, oh my gosh, wait a second, like I can make this stuff work. Mm-hmm. And I remember one of the things that he talks about in there, and really it is the it is the origin of this podcast, was the experience I had from being in the gift that I had from being in that funk to what focusing on my feelings and my emotions and following my bliss did to get me out of that, and the experience of just listening and walking. I mean, I just remember like walking down the street and just like imagine I'm just this like glowing ball of energy and love and gratitude, and just like, you know, and then taking us, you know, pause it for a little bit and like take your favorite song and crank that and just go down the street like, oh, and then go to New York and do that and feel that in the energy of the city. And I'm just like, man, I felt unstoppable. And I was. But that was like, how do I capture that? Like, was such a gift in my life, and I want to do that. And that's, you know, the podcast was on my mind for years, and I really wanted to get into a place in my business where I had the same experience with this guy, where he had all these accomplishments, like New York Times bestsellers, like multi-million-dollar business. And I'm like, wow, that really made a difference for me to listen and be receptive. I don't want to be someone just talking about it that can't walk the walk. Yep. And so even though this took longer than I really would have wanted to release, like, it sounds like from a lot of listeners that are closed off that they've been more perceptive because they have someone who's talking about it, who's like, okay, well, at least they have something to back it up on, right? So I just think that was just so beautiful and so amazing.
One quick thing is I actually had the opposite reaction to, you know, listening to the Kevin Trudeau stuff really made me reevaluate where I was in my life and business. And very shortly after that, I went through a breakup, and then I started to question, it just really made me question what was going on in my life. And so that kind of happened, and then my business, and it kind of sparked almost like a downward spiral, because I was like, I don't actually, I can manifest all this amazing stuff, but I'm not doing that. And so I kept focusing on the negative, kept attracting people and clients that just were not resonating with me, but I kept doing it anyway. And that is where I started to experience my burnout. And it was right towards the end of the year. And I remember coming over here to the US, moving, and James, you and I had a conversation, and I was like, I feel so stuck. I feel burnt out. I don't want to do anything. I don't like this. I don't know what to do. And that was a really interesting moment in my life, because you and I had a conversation, and we're like, why am I going to keep trying to hit the square peg into the round hole? Why don't we do something different? You know, why don't I pivot? How do I pivot? What do I really want? That conversation sparked a bigger involvement and a bigger partnership between you and me. And so now we're like, okay, I want to have a mastermind. You want to have a mastermind. Let's do a mastermind together. You know, I had already been pretty involved in your membership program. So let's take a bigger role on that. Let's do a podcast. Like, all of these things just started to happen over, you know, a very short period of time. But that wasn't until I got really honest with myself and was like, I really checked in after listening to all these people manifesting all these amazing things. I was like, well, that's funny, because here I am, and I'm hating my life, I'm hating my clients. You know, something had to give. And so in that moment, I was able to kind of take a step back and really put it out in front of me and look at it and say, this is not what I want. Great. So what do you get a lot of what you do want from the things you don't want. And so I was like, well, this is what I don't want. And so that dictated then, how do I make all this amazing stuff that I do want? How do I put that into action? How do I get into the right kind of action that's going to make me happy and me feel inspired and me feel, you know, motivated and ready to make a difference?
Yeah, there's so much clarity that can be had. You know, you ask so many people, 9 out of 10 people, wait, what do you want?
Yeah.
So many people do, I don't know. And they say, I don't know, for a lot of reasons. Most of the time they know. There are people that don't know, but there are a lot of people that don't want to declare it and say it just in case they don't get what they want, or maybe they don't want to be judged for it. But we can very clearly tell you what we don't want or what we don't like. And you said something that's just so powerful, which is that if you can just look at what you don't want anymore, the other side of that is exactly what you want. You know, like, I want to get out of debt. Like, so you want to be debt free. You want to be financially independent. Okay. You know, there's always the antithesis of that. And I'm not saying that these tapes were the way out of a funk. If you're in a funk or a burnout, it was just my way out. For Phoebe, it was a little different, but for both of us, the theme was the same, is that we got clarity on what we want, and we let that be the driving motivator. And the thing for me is in this first phase, I didn't have any wants or desires beyond this ideal launch that I had put on this pedestal, and I had nothing beyond that. I had no vision. It was all just like, well, let me just see if I can make this finally work. And then what? And then I got to the top of the mountain and there was no view, and I needed a view. I needed a vision. And this gave me that. It gave me the, wait a second, this is, if this is a journey or this is a game, we can create the rules of the game and we can set the destination of that journey. See, sometimes we forget that. When people tell you that life is a journey, well, you can set the damn destination. And I hadn't done that, or I just had an off-ramp. I just had a pit stop, and I hadn't looked at what is the ultimate destination. And that's where that first evolution for me was into phase 2 of this, which was to focus on the impact and transformation. I can't tell you enough. Like, if you want lasting inspiration and sustainable motivation and energy, see, these launches and the money and the results like that, these, you get these dopamine hits, but it really is like a drug. Like, you will not get the same high next time. It'll be like less than before. It's like a drug. But as far as I know, in 9 years, as I can only speak to that time, that there is no lessening of the impact when it still has the same effect when someone comes to me and they're like, OMG, here's how you've helped me. That doesn't get old.
Right.
And I think if we're up to big things, I think if we want to make a huge impact, we need to make that the focus, the target. But we also need that feedback as much as humanly possible. And it's so funny. I hope I can share this, but I was talking to Lewis Howes recently, and one of the things he told me that we do not do that I so want to do is every week he shares, when his team gets on a team meeting, someone on the team will share some of their latest testimonials that have come in through customer support from readers of his book, The School of Greatness, or any of his online programs. And that's like what they start their team meetings off, so that they're all like remembering what they're doing this for. And man, that's just such a huge piece. But I also want to share something else that happened at this transition, that yes, I could do the internal work of I'm going to focus on the impact, the transformation, and the way I can be of service to others. And that's going to fuel me to keep going. And it did. And I continue to grow. That's the internal side. But, here at the Mind Your Business podcast, we like to blend the left brain and the right brain. We want to talk about the mental, emotional, and the logical, tangible, strategic side. It's both, ladies and gentlemen. You can say we're a spiritual being living in a physical body, and we're living in a mechanical world. So we need both, right? Gravity still exists. So the other thing that I did here was I changed my business model. I went from just having these launches, or thinking I had to have these launches, and instead said, what if I could find a way to generate revenue without having to launch every month, where people could pay me again and again? And that's where RMI, Real Marketing Insider, actually came from. 3 days before I left for New York. Remember I said, like, one of the things I manifested was moving to New York. So I saying goodbye to one of my best friends, and we sat down to say, hey man, this is the last time I'm going to see you until I invite you out to the city. And he was talking to me, and it just came up, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is what I'm going to do next. And now I had a new game, and I had a new goal, and a new leg on my journey. And that was still like 5 years ago, creating that. So we can, if we're feeling that burnout, remember that, yes, there's internal work that we can do to, step into a more positive direction, to follow our bliss and get more clarity on what we want and focus on that. But also that we can really build a business that suits us. And this is something I always love to talk about, is I see so many people, especially if you're a coach or a personal brand, being the martyr to the marketplace, where you think you just have to work harder and longer and sacrifice yourself to everyone else. And I just said, no, I'm going to find a business model where people just pay me month after month. That'll be awesome. And I did. And we built that up to a $500,000 a year business, launching only twice a year, small promotions. I just want to give people hope that just because you may not like the experience of how you're serving your customers or selling your products, it's not the only way. There are so many ways. In fact, for most people, that becomes the problem, right? There's too many ways. So the answer is you find the way that suits you, that fits your lifestyle. I know Jeff Walker, who, is the inventor and creator of Product Launch Formula. His personality type and his, he's talked about this in his videos and stuff. His style is he loves to do a short burst of, go work and then take months off. So the product launch works for him. That doesn't mean it works for everybody.
And just to have that permission. And I think you said something earlier, and I'm like, yeah, and just giving, hopefully we can give you, the tips and the tools, but the permission. So many people just need, my event in Sonoma, we had a couple of situations where people were like, well, I can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? Why can't you do that? And they're like, well, because, maybe someone's not doing that yet in my area, or, well, that would require me to kind of to raise my prices or to actually facilitate a workshop. And I'm like, perfect. Well, why wouldn't that work for you? And how can we pivot in a way that suits all of our needs as far as like our home life, our, health and fitness goals. And, and that's, I think, obviously the underlying theme of business by design and, all of that stuff. But it's like, how do you fit your business into your life, not your life into your business? And I think that's really important that we get so wrapped up in how do we create, that as entrepreneurs, our businesses have to be this massive thing where, it takes over our lives. And I don't think that people really want that. But that's what a lot of friends of mine feel it has to be.
Well, and here's another thing to think about. This will blow some minds if this will really land for people. Is that, yes, as Phoebe is saying, like there is this pressure and that comparison-itis that we have to, well, I got to be bigger or better than somebody else. And it's so not accurate. It's hilarious because I'll give an example of a client that worked with me and joined the inner circle. I asked him in the interview process, a very powerful question, why me? And the story he told me was he said, well, you were on a webinar and, it was the top of the hour on the webinar and the webinar was like officially over. And then you just said, oh, the surf's up and it's really nice out, so I'm going to go surfing. And then you just got off the call. I'm like, okay. Like, so that's why I want to work with you, because I see that you've created a boundary and a balance between work and having a life, and you can still be successful in business and have a life. And, let's just sit on that for a moment. So what I take away from that, and this isn't one person, I've had this is like, especially the more people get to know me, that's something that they're like, I want that. And so you think people are going to be attracted to you because you have the biggest list or the biggest launch numbers. And that's not true. What I admire and what you can tell these clients are admiring is the person that can be happy and have balance and have a life and do the things they enjoy first. And there's a business that fuels that. So people are looking, well, let's do it this way. If you were to ask the question, who does your audience aspire to be? And you simply stepped into that answer, like you just lived that, you walked that walk, then that would be so much more effective than running around trying to have the biggest business in town. It's just, if you're a coach or a personal brand or anything like that, like it's so true for so many people. And that's something that always still reminds me today. And in fact, that became an affirmation since the beginning, inspire others through my actions. And the affirmation actually changed its meaning for me. It used to be in the early days before this burnout, it was inspire others through my actions. And how I took that to mean was take the most action, work harder, work longer. And now inspire others through my actions means enjoy life, put you first, because that will give my customers and our listeners permission to do the same.
Right. I have a very similar, a similar thing where the people who came to my Sonoma event were like, I just knew we were going to be friends. I was like, what? Why? Like, well, I watch all your Instagram stories and I just know, and you travel a lot and you post pictures of all the places you go. And I just started to realize that all the things that I've been looking for from a female role model standpoint, I can't seem to find. And all the things that are important to me, I'm like, well, I want a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Well, now I've just created that person, that ideal person, my ideal role model. And then I'm just becoming that. And in the Tony Robbins documentary, I Am Not Your Guru, he talks about that. He's like, I crafted Tony Robbins before there was a Tony Robbins. And then I just became that.
Yeah.
I was like, that is powerful, because that is exactly, I can be that person for women that they can aspire to be, or that they want to be, and they want to be on the boat with me. They want to be traveling around the world and having a business that is able to fuel that. And that's something that is super important to me. And, as I look for clients and as I put on events, it's really important that I am sharing that piece of myself.
And that's much more motivating and inspiring, and it's something that can get you out of bed in the morning when you are feeling like you don't want to get out of bed in the morning, than just want to make a bunch of money. Because once you do that, for a lot of people, not everyone, you're like, okay, I did that, now what? And that's this next piece. Now, for me, there was a third phase or evolution, and that was not like shifting away from the customer transformation, customer-centric focus, but maybe just adding this as a deeper layer. And that was something we've talked about in the past, having this team focus. There is now this level of just beautiful unfolding and fulfillment and gratitude as I step into more of a leadership role with this team that I've built in my business, and seen the impact we have on their lives, the interaction, just the teamwork. And it's so funny. This came up for me just now, is that I was just reminded of my college acceptance essay when I got into college. It was the most bizarre essay ever, but I loved it. And it was a story I wrote about the time when I was a junior in high school. One summer, my friends and I decided to, this is so weird, you're going to laugh at me, build a treehouse. So you're like 17, 18-year-old kid, and we're going to build a treehouse. And no other reason than we were just bored, and we had the wood and a tree. So we said, let's do it. And so the story was, there was this moment where there's like 5 guys, and I've somehow managed to get them all working on something. There was this moment, I still remember it as so vividly today, where I look up and like 2 guys are carrying wood over here, one guy's up in a tree nailing, this other guy's working on a side project, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, wow, like I just corralled these guys who would rather just be at the beach, laying on the sand, like checking out girls all day, to like work on this project with me. And it was like my first experience of teamwork for something that I had started as an idea or a vision, and now these people are all working, and that's now what we do. And I know that's not for everybody. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't want a team, and that's fine. I'm just saying, for me, that's the next thing that has evolved and shown up for me, that drives me, that gets me out of bed. And it is really when we can, I think if there's an ultimate message that we're pulling out from here, is that if we are in a breakdown, a funk, a burnout, or any type of depression, this may be hard to hear, but I think what can at least keep us out of it, or keep us going, or keep us inspired, is that what we're doing is something bigger than us.
Right. That
it's not just about us. And I'm not trying to speak down as some like altruistic Mother Teresa type. It's just like, hey, I want to help people. And I think at the end of the day, the vast majority of people do, and most of our listeners do. And, I think if anyone here wrote a book, wrote an article, or did a podcast and had 20 people reply to that and say, this piece of content changed my life, I don't think anyone would not feel good by that.
Right.
And be like, wow, I should probably write another one. Right. And so that's just evidence that like, wow, like, well, what is that? That can drive us. And if we start to seek that out, no matter how like, but I just don't want to do anything. Like, start there and find a way to keep experiencing that and getting that feedback. And, you know, again, like, I just love how Lewis, his team, finds these testimonials every week and reads them to the whole team, and it just inspires them to be like, this is why we're doing this. And we need that purpose. We need that meaning. And it's just so important.
Yeah, I think starting with this, like, gratitude and how to be of service, like forgetting all about the money, which is hard when, you know, rent is up, and I totally get it. But if you come from a place of service and a place of gratitude and genuinely wanting to help people, you're never going to go wrong. And for me with the podcast, you know, of course, we always try to come from a place of inspiration, but, you know, there have been a couple times, one or two, where I had to go back to the iTunes reviews and be like, why do we do this? You know, like, oh, I'm not feeling that inspired. And looking at some of, you know, the reviews and people, you know, calling me out by name and, you know, James is so great at this, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, like, this is when we hear that people are listening and that, you know, maybe they made one simple change or they added an affirmation in the morning and this is what happened and this is the result and they made this amount of money or whatever it is really inspiring. And so anytime, you know, that you can document any of those things, anytime somebody writes me a nice email, I put it in a folder. It's called You're Amazing. And I go back to, it's a little embarrassing, but I go back to that folder, you know, whenever I'm having a bad day and in a funk or feeling a little down and, you know, I suck at everything or whatever, I go to my You're Amazing folder and I'm like, right, I don't suck at everything. Look at this lady.
Yeah.
You know?
That's important. Again, I also hear that if we're in a breakdown, if we're burnt out, hearing this probably has you go, you two just shut up. You don't know.
Stop being so happy.
Yeah. And we get that. And there is actually a reason for that, by the way. If someone is ever listening to our podcast and feeling that way, it's because, and again, like, it depends on how open people want to be to this conversation. But if we're all energy, then our emotions are an indicator of that energy, and energy is measured by the, you know, frequency. So we're just on different frequencies. It's just like different languages. One's the language of gratitude, love, and enthusiasm. The other one's just the gratitude of depression. And those two just do not resonate. And there's a gap between them. And so, you know, there have been times that I've been in a bad mood and you see a motivational quote and you're like, what do you know? Right? Come on. Has anybody else done that? Is that just me? And then there are other times you see a motivational quote and you're like, yes.
Repost.
Thank you. Right? And so that's just a really great indicator to, like, look at the gap, the separation there. So if we were to offer what to do when you're facing a burnout, I think the number one most important thing we could share is, first of all, you're not alone. Not only is this okay, but it's very normal. It's very common. In fact, it's a lot of people that originally approach me is because they're stuck in this or they've faced it in the past and they're kind of afraid that it's going to come up again. So there's nothing wrong with you. And I think, like, if there is a step one, it is like just a level of acceptance, because I think, which takes me to number two, it's so much harder when you try to use willpower to solve it. So when you're burnt out, you're tired, you're unmotivated, you're uninspired. And we try to use external motivation, like, let me have another cup of coffee and let me just yell at myself and scream at myself in the mirror until I convince myself to, like, open that inbox and reply to that email that's been sitting there, or do that one action item that just feels like just so painful to do that it literally feels like, and this is always the Abraham Hicks analogy that we love using, like you're paddling upstream. And so instead, I would just let go. Like, there's this acceptance and then just, like, relaxing into it, because we have to remember that it's not permanent. And I think the more we struggle against it or force it or resist out of it, to be like, if I just push harder through this, like, and I felt that, I felt the difference so much. I know what inspired and in the flow work feels like, and I know everyone else here has, and then you know what it feels like when you're not in the flow. And the amount of productivity, let's not even talk about productivity, right? Because this is another thing. It's not even productivity, but also like, have you been productive with something that you never even did anything with? Mm-hmm. Like write a sales letter to a product you never launched. It was like, oh, it was like the greatest sales letter. And then you like never used it. Mm-hmm. How many like projects have you worked on that you never even completed or never did anything with, right? And so we just end up using our creative juices as we paddle upstream for stuff that we don't even end up taking advantage of. And so I would really invite and encourage anyone who's feeling this burnout to just like own it, you know, and relax into it and really start to see, okay, now that I'm not fighting it or resisting it, what do I feel naturally inclined to do? That's, I think, the way out, as far as I know, is that it's kind of baby steps out. You know, there's that passage, that phrase, follow your bliss. And if it means doing something like, I honestly just want to watch TV, and okay, go watch TV for a little bit, and then like maybe go for a walk. And
I was gonna say, that's my thing, is like, I know when I'm in a breakdown or I'm frustrated, I've learned this, all I need to do is go outside. That for me is like, just get outside, get my feet in the grass. Mm-hmm. And also I can go one step further on that number 2, which is I had a product that I did all of this stuff for. I sold it. And then I was like, this is so not what I want to be doing. And I refunded everybody. And that was awful. It was a terrible feeling in the moment, but I was like, you know what? And I wrote out this really long email and offered all this stuff, you know, time with me later on. But once I was honest with them, I was like, I did this because I was forcing it. This was nothing that I wanted to release. And then also with the, you know, you're not alone. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. Also, like, appreciate and, you know, be really grateful for that experience, because now for your, you know, whenever your next breakdown comes, you're going to start to see those red flags coming a little bit sooner, and you're going to be able to stop the spiral faster, and you're going to have more tools in your tool belt to be able to say, oh yeah, okay, I recognize this. Here we go again, you know, and then you can start from that place where you might not have spiraled down to the ground, but you can stop the bleeding and kind of go outside and go for a walk and kind of get yourself out of it faster. Yeah.
Yeah. So follow your bliss. I think this step 2 is about doing the play and not the work. The work is just going to keep you back in the burnout, and to really give ourselves permission to do whatever, even if it's just, as Phoebe said, go outside. Like for me, it's going in the ocean or reading a book or listening to a podcast. If you're like listening to this and you're like, dude, I'm good. Like I am like, it's great. You know, this was your weekly episode and I'm all caught up, so I'm just going to listen to this, but I'm good. The best advice I would have for you right now is to make a list of 30 to 50 things that make you happy. And gosh, one of my mentors, one of my spiritual mentors, and you know, when I was learning healing and stuff, gave me this, and I totally screwed this assignment up. I made it all my goals, like write a best-selling book and blah, blah, blah. Like it was all these unachievable, unattainable things. She's like, you did not follow it. I get that you think that those things will make you happy, but I'm saying, what are the things that if you could just go do it right now and it would raise the frequency, right? Or make you a little bit happier. And so those are things like, oh, read a book or meditate or go for a walk or play on the sand or go surfing. And then all of a sudden you have this whole list. And it's easy to write that list when you're happy now, right? It's not as easy when you're in a totally burnout mode because you're just not motivated to do anything. But those are the things that you can at least get the willpower to do those things. Like, all right, I'm just going to get myself off the couch and go for a walk. And
go get a cappuccino.
Go get my coffee and do that. And stay there, right? It's like we feel a little dose of like, okay, I think I'm good. I'm gonna go back to work, and it's like, boom, you're right back where you were. Like sometimes we just got to recharge, and you got to, as an entrepreneur, you're not an employee. If I said this enough in this damn podcast, like so much of what we have to do is unprogram the 22 plus years of ingrained programming of how to stay in line and be told what to do, and you're only is worth what your hourly wage is and nothing more, nothing less. And you've got to break free of that, because if you have a belief, if you have this programming construct that if I want to make more money, I just have to work more hours because that's what I did when I was a server. I just worked longer hours and I made more money. I mean, you hear it all the time. Like I'll hear, people in a job saying, I want to make more money. Can I work more hours? And this is just not how it works here as an entrepreneur. It doesn't. It can, but it doesn't. Right? You can work more and make more money. You can work more and make less money. Okay? So if we can break free from that, we can begin to give ourselves a little bit more permission. And we've said this before, the play is the work. That you do need that time to build up the energy, the creative juices, and the flow so that inspiration hits you and that new idea comes. And if we're not doing that, you're just an employee in your own damn business. And you're not seeing the vision. You're not dreaming to that bigger destination in your journey, and then boom, it's a vicious cycle, and you're only looking at the thing that's 6 months down the road. You're going to hit that and be like, I did it. Now what? And the cycle repeats. Now, I would say the last step or tip that I would offer here, number 3, is to also know that you have power in creating a business, and this is why we call it business by design, where you choose and identify what you want first. What is important to you? How do you want to live your life? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? And build the business around that. So many people, and you've heard my rant on this in the past, who just look to others and just copy. Oh, this person's doing webinars, so I'm going to do webinars because if it worked for them, I'll just copy what they did and not think for myself and do that. Well, now we're running around copying what everyone else is doing, not actually checking in with ourselves and saying, well, what do I want? Maybe I don't want to do it this way. Maybe I don't want to work this much. Maybe I want to work more right now. Who knows? But if you start there from what do I want, we talk about this inside my program, what are the rules that you're going to create for your life? Like, I'm not going to do any one-on-one, or I'm only going to work Monday through Thursday and I take every Friday off. Like, I love that stuff. Why aren't we doing that? And you can set up the business around that, and it's so much fun. Why would you have it any other way?
That is actually one of my commitments for this year was I don't work on Fridays.
I think it's even more than a commitment. It's just a fact. It's just a rule. Like, there's no work on Fridays. Sorry. Oh, the website's down? Okay, well, someone else can handle it. I don't work on Fridays.
Yeah, I love it. And I actually had a conversation with another entrepreneur recently, and she was telling me that, she's like, I don't want this $1 million business that everyone's talking about. I want a $250,000 a year business where I get to travel 4 months a year.
Yep.
And I was like, yes, I'm on board with that. Like, that sounds amazing. And she's like, and I want it to be really easy. And so we were talking about, like, how can I help her with her launch and her little launches and her evergreen launches basically to support this lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to have that conversation because that is so important. Why are we all, it's great to be like, oh, I have a 7-figure business, but also, like, is that desperately what you want? And if it's not, don't be afraid to say that and to admit that to yourself. Create the business that is right for you and where your priorities take precedent and where you get to, build that business that you have worked so hard to build and, fulfill on that dream that you've been dying to create on.
Gosh, I just remember when I started up-leveling my business and hiring a team, and I had a month where my expenses just about matched my revenue. And that was a very scary time. And I remember calling my mentor and coach at the time, freaking out. I remember just going, can't I just go back to the $200,000 a year business and it's just me and my VA and it's stress-free and that's it? And I remember his response was, it scared the crap out of me. It was like, yeah. And I'm like, wait.
Wrong answer.
Yeah. You're supposed to tell me, like, no, you got this, keep going. But it is like, and I think it's just a great point. And we've talked about it on another episode, the one where Patty Palmer did her question of the week, where she's like asking about growing in a team. And I said, well, you really got to ask yourself, why do you want to grow? It's just kind of this natural assumption that building your business means growing, and you're like, oh, I'm at 100,000, so now I got to get to 500,000, now I got to get to 1 million, and now I got to do multiple million. And there's just so much. It's a different game.
Yep.
So you have to ask, well, what is the game that I want to play? And more money isn't the answer. The answer is getting clarity on what you want and making it about getting that. So, again, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to this important episode. I think we definitely wanted to address it, and I hope we did a good job here. again, if you're feeling burnt out, or if you have felt burnout in the past, it's nothing to shame yourself for. It's nothing to be guilty of. And, sometimes it's hard to talk publicly about it if it's something that you're currently in, if it's something that you've just recently dealt with. And so I'm not saying you need to talk about it to your customers or your audience. Sometimes we've talked about this before. People get a little too authentic in their sharing, a little TMI-ish, a little too soon. But that doesn't negate the fact that it's real, and most of us deal with it on some level. And this is part of it at times. And just, want to acknowledge everyone for that, and that you're not alone.
And go out and get the support that you need. In one of my companies I worked in when I was 19, they always used to say, praise down, complain up. And they'd be like, praise down to all the people on your team, but if you have a real complaint, complain up to your coach or mentor. And so if, you're not complaining, but if you are in the middle of burnout, or you're struggling, you don't know what to do, reach out to, if you're in a mastermind, or reach out to your peers, that somebody, a confidant that you feel that you can, unload on in a way that helps you, and maybe you can kind of forge a relationship there. But know that you're not alone. Know that other people are going through this, and see how productively you can kind of get yourself out of it.
Thank you so much for listening. I'm James Wedmore.
I'm Phoebe Mroczek.
And we'll see you on the next episode. Are you frustrated that no matter how hard you hustle, no matter how much you get done in a day, you still feel like you have little results to show for it? Do you feel like you're doing everything right, but there's still something missing? Well, what if there was an easier way? What if your business could be fun, effortless, and profitable? Phoebe and I have put together a free audio MP3 for you, compiling the 77 business affirmations for creating success from the inside out. And we want to give it to you absolutely free. This is your chance to rewire your brain for bigger results in your life and your business. To get instant access absolutely free, simply visit 77affirmations.com. That's the number 77affirmations.com.